So I understand you learned about Harriet Tubman this week. What were some of your favorite characteristics from Harriet Tubman?
Well, I liked her perseverance to help others because she knew how well they were not being treated after she'd escaped and realized what was going on. So,
Okay, so you learned about the Underground Railroad, right?
Yeah.
And so, what do you think about how the slaves ran away? Do you think they were being disobedient to the law by running away?
Well, like if the masters were treating them right and like giving them equal rights, then they wouldn't have wanted to run away, and so they would have been obeying the masters if he told them not to run away. But if he didn't give them if he said you can run away whenever you want, then they wouldn't be, and they wouldn't be disobeying the law. But they would also have other people who would think that they won't, because they wouldn't always have freedom papers or such. So they might have been disobeying the law, or they might have, depending on their situation.
Right. So some of the slaves that ran away in the Underground Railroad were being disobedient. Because their laws were not just, does that mean that if your parents' laws aren't just, that you can disobey them?
Well, I guess so, because if your parents are telling you, well, I think it depends on like how big of a matter it is, because if your parents are telling you to go jump off a cliff, that's obviously not very just, and you're not going to go do that. But if they're maybe telling you that if you go run half a mile, you'll get an ice cream cone, but if your brother runs half a mile, he'll get two ice cream cones. I guess maybe you wouldn't really want to run half a mile. So I guess but if you're thinking of it not just, you should still obey your parents. But in the slave's case, I guess it's different because that's disobeying God's law. So you should always put God's law above what people are saying. So if your parents are saying something that contradicts God's law, to obey that, to obey God's law, not what your parents are saying. So I guess it just depends.
So I understand that some slaves had masters, and their masters held them as slaves. And obviously, today we think that slavery is very wrong. What do you think went through the minds of those masters to keep those slaves?
Well, I kind of think we were discussing this earlier, and Sister Bates had a good point that when we are, a lot of times we think of people as objects when we don't get what we want, or sometimes we just think of them as objects because we don't know them, we don't know how they feel, we haven't been in their shoes. I think that's kind of a little bit of the reason why. I also kind of think that because the slaves were different, they had black skin, that was kind of the reason why as well, that they didn't think that they deserved anything better than being a slave. They thought that they got what they got because that's what they deserved. They only deserved to be a slave because they thought of them as animals, and that's because they were different. So
Okay, so Harriet Tubman was free, and she still went back to free a lot of slaves. How how do you think she had a lot of fear, and how do you think that fear had to do with her actions?
well, she kept telling, as people were like, "You're gonna get caught. Why aren't you? Like, there's a big chance you're gonna get caught. Why aren't you afraid?" She kept saying, "I am not afraid, for God is on my side." I think one of the biggest things that stuck out to me was that she did not fear man, she feared God. And the way that she feared God was in respect and reverence. She knew that he was on her side, and so she did not fear the men because she knew that God was with her.
Harriet Tubman had a sincere desire to do what was right. Where do you think that desire came from?
I think that the desire was part of a personal mission and that it was given straight from God. You can't really look into where a desire or a passion came from as far as their childhood or whatever. That it just is their personal mission. Not everyone has to have that passion because not all personal missions have to be that big, but that answers your question.
Yep. So Harriet Tubman was a faithful pursuer of her mission in life, and she completed it. How can we do that in our own lives, in our own personal missions?
Well, I think we need to, first of all, we need to find out what our mission is by praying to God, and then we can ask for help from Him to be able to pursue our mission and be able to complete it.
Awesome. So Harriet Tubman didn't fear man. How do you think we can become like that? How do you think we can just fear God and not man?
Well, fear of man is pride, so if you're looking at specific ways to put away your pride, I think you have to do things that show your submissiveness towards Him, so like submitting to His will by like prayer or service is a good way to open your heart to His will, I think, and doing those things like going to the temple and basically keeping His commandments, because that shows you're open to His will, and that leads to humility, which is the opposite of pride and the fear of man. So, yeah.
How can we fear and trust someone at the same time?
Well, to fear someone means to want to do what's right to please them, but technically that couldn't always be the right thing to do. So trusting them, you have to make sure that you can trust them to help you make the right decisions so that you can make the right decisions when you fear them too. Like that.
So how do we cast out fear?
I think that feeling the Spirit can help a lot with that. And if we pray, then Jesus will help us.
Do you think the slaves who ran away were being disobedient?
I think that the slaves who ran away, yeah, they were being disobedient to the law, for sure, because they, according to the law, they were property, and people owned them. And so by running away, they were being disobedient. But they were being disobedient to man's law. And they were doing what they knew was right, because according to God's law, they were people, they were children of God. And that's why it was so significant that they run away, because they were doing what they knew was right. And it's a lot more important to follow God's law than man's law.